Hi everybody. I am going to talk about the international initiatives for the protection of rights of persons with disability. Any restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity in a manner or within the range considered normal for the human beings that results from impairment is termed as disability. Disability is part of the human condition. Almost everyone experiences some form of impairment or other, temporarily or permanently, at some point in life, and those who survive to old age are more likely to experience increasing difficulties in their day-to-day functioning. Impairment concerns the physical aspects of health, and disability is a loss of functional capacity resulting from an impaired organ. Handicap is a measure of the social and cultural consequences of an impairment or disability. Systematic research into the prevalence and determinants of disability has been scanty from India, although it is an important public health problem. Disability is the best example of the iceberg phenomenon of disease. This is because of the difficulty in identifying the mild and moderate degrees of physical and mental disability which are unrecognized by the healthcare delivery system and the survey team members. The World Health Organization estimates that 10% of the world's population has some form of disability. Individuals living with disabilities are denied the access to human rights, inclusion, communication, basic facilities such as healthcare, educational, employment in the general scenario. Given the magnitude of the problem, it is important that persons with disability must receive greater socio-economic and political attention. In this backdrop, it is relevant to discuss the various rights of persons with disability, the importance of protecting their rights, and the international initiatives for the same purpose. At the end of this talk, you will get an overview about the rights of persons with disability, gain an adequate knowledge about the importance of protecting the rights of persons with disability, understand the various international initiatives adopted for the protection of persons with disability, and learn the provisions and the rights enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability by the United Nations in 2007. Disability is not a barrier to enjoy the rights of an individual. A person with a disability has the same rights which a non-disabled person enjoys. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in the year 2007 and International Disability Rights Monitored in the United Nations are some of the international initiatives to consider the rights of persons with disability. Let me discuss the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities by the United Nations. The purpose of the Convention was to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedom by all persons with a disability, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. The Convention defined persons with a disability as those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments which, in interaction with various barriers, may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. The general principle accepted in this convention is to respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices and independence of persons, non-discrimination, full and effective participation and inclusion in society, respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disability as part of human diversity and humanity, equality of opportunity, accessibility, equality between men and women, and respect for the evolving capacities of children with disability, and respect for the right of children with disability to preserve their identities. The Article 4 of the Convention speaks about the general obligations of the states. One of the general obligations is that the state parties are to ensure and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedom for all persons with disability without discrimination of any kind on the basis of disability. To this end, state parties should undertake to adopt all appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the implementation of the rights recognized in the present Convention, to take all appropriate measures including legislation to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs and practices that constitute discrimination against persons with disability, to take into account the protection and promotion of the human rights of persons with disability in all policies and programs, to refrain from engaging in any act or practice that is inconsistent with the present Convention, and to ensure that public authorities and institutions act in conformity with the present Convention, to take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability by any person, organization, or private enterprise, to undertake or promote research and development of universally designed goods, services, equipment, and facilities as defined in Article 2 of the present Convention, which should require the minimum possible adaptation and the least cost to meet the specific needs of persons with disabilities, to promote the availability and use of universal design in the development of standards and guidelines, to undertake or promote research and development of and to promote the availability and use of new technologies, including information and communication technologies, mobility aids, devices, and assistive technologies suitable for persons with disabilities, giving priority to technologies at an affordable cost, to provide accessible information to persons with disability about mobility aids, devices, and assistive technologies, including new technologies as well as other forms of assistance, support services and facilities, and to promote the training of professionals and staff working with persons with disability on the rights recognized in this Convention so as to better provide the assistance and services guaranteed by those rights. With regard to economic, social, and cultural rights, each state party undertakes to take measures to the maximum of its available resources and, where needed, within the framework of international cooperation, with a view to achieving progressively the full realization of these rights without prejudice to those obligations contained in the present Convention that are immediately applicable according to international law. In the development and implementation of legislation and policies to implement the present Convention and in other decision-making processes concerning issues relating to persons with disability, state party shall closely consult with and actively involve persons with disability, including children with disability, through their representative organizations. The Convention provides equality and non-discrimination to the persons with disability. Special provisions were arranged to women and children with disability. One of the chief components of the Convention was awareness raising with regard to disability, especially to combat stereotypes, prejudices, and harmful practices relating to persons with disability, including those based on sex and age in all areas of life. Let me state some of the major rights enshrined in the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. Right to accessibility, Article 9. Right to life, Article 10. Situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies, Article 11. Equal recognition before the law, Article 12. Access to justice, Article 13. Liberty and security of the person, Article 14. Freedom from torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, Article 15. Freedom from exploitation, violence and abuse, Article 16. Protecting the integrity of the person, Article 17. Liberty of movement and nationality, Article 18. Living independently and being included in the community, Article 19. Personal mobility, Article 20. Freedom of expression and opinion and access to information, Article 21. Respect for privacy, Article 22. Respect for home and the family, Article 23. Right to education, Article 24. Right to health, Article 25. Habitation and rehabilitation, Article 26. Right to work and employment, Article 27. Right to have adequate standard of living and social protection, Article 28. Right to participation in political and public life, Article 29. And participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure and sports, Article 30. Let me explain about the International Disability Rights Monitor, shortly known as IDRM in the United Nations Organization. The mission of the International Disability Rights Monitor project is to promote the full inclusion and participation of people with a disability in society and to advance the use of international humanitarian law in ensuring that the rights of people with a disability are respected and ensured. Founded by Dr. William Kennedy Smith in 2003, today the IDRM relies on a grassroots network of researchers in more than 30 countries worldwide to document and assess the conditions of people with a disability and the ongoing human rights violations that are part of their daily lives. Members of the IDRM team were intimately involved in the negotiations that led to the UN Convention. Since 2001, IDRM has produced 6 reports. They are 1. International Disability Rights Compendium, released in June 2003. The compendium is a comparative analysis of the living conditions and legal protections of people with disabilities in 52 countries around the world and the results of field trials of the IDRM methodology in El Salvador and Nicaragua. 2. Regional Report of the America. This was the first regional report and was released in August of 2004. It was formally presented to the United Nations during the 4th Ad Hoc Committee meeting. The situation of people with disability is comprehensively described and documented for 24 countries in the region. 3. International Disability Rights. An overview and comparative analysis of international and national initiatives to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities. 4. Regional Report of Asia. Released in August 2005, this report was presented to the United Nations during the 6th meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee that debated the proposed International Convention on the Rights of People with Disability. The report was produced in partnership with the Disabled Peoples International and included country reports on Cambodia, China, India, Japan, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. 5. Disability and early tsunami relief efforts in India, Indonesia and Thailand. Released in September 2005, this report is a joint project of the CIR and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Disability. The project evaluated the availability and accessibility of critical services for people with disability during the phases of relief and reconstruction after the tsunami in 2004. The resulting report provides a look at how governments, international relief organizations and local disability organizations responded to the needs of people with disability in the aftermath of the tsunami. 6. Regional Report of Europe. Completed in 2007, this report was the first report of its kind to be published following the passage of the International Convention on the Rights of People with Disability. Researchers from 14 European countries contributed to this report that outlines the level of inclusiveness of people living with disability from across a wide geographical region. The findings from this report have played a key role in the discussions during the United Nations 2008 Human Rights Calendar. Let me mention about the Millennium framework. It is formulated by the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in the high-level intergovernmental meeting to conclude the Asian and Pacific Decade of the Disabled Persons. This regional framework for action that provides regional policy recommendations for action by governments in the region and concerned stakeholders to achieve an inclusive, barrier-free and rights-based society for persons with disability in the new decade from 2003 to 2012. This regional framework identifies 7 areas for priority action in the new decade. They are: 1. Self-help organizations of persons with disability and related family and parent association. 2. Women with disability. 3. Early detection, early intervention and education. 4. Training and employment, including self-employment. 5. Access to built environment and public transport. 6. Access to information and communications related to assistive technologies. And 7. Poverty alleviation through capacity building, social security and sustainable livelihood programs. Each priority area contains critical issues, targets and the actions required. It incorporates the goals of Millennium Development and their targets to ensure that concerns relating to persons with disability become an integral part of efforts to achieve the goals. Let me highlight the issues related to elaborating a special instrument on the rights of persons with disability. There are advantages and disadvantages to elaborating a new international instrument specifically addressing the human rights of persons with disability. There are extensive lists of existing norms, principles, declarations, standards, and guidelines dealing with disability issues that are dispersed throughout various instruments. The existing human rights mechanisms at the international level have not yet fully addressed the rights of persons with disability within their respective mandates. There is a view that a sufficiently specific, legally binding instrument could be a much better resource than the present dispersed measures in that new instrument could bring clarity to the current understanding of the rights of persons with disability and how they fit into the general human rights framework. A counter-argument to the elaboration of a new international instrument is that it could have the unintended consequence of marginalizing the rights of persons with disability within the United Nations human rights mechanisms as well as within the overall work of the United Nations in the field of disability. This unintended consequence, coupled with resource constraints that already limit United Nations human rights mechanisms, may involve relevant considerations. Another issue is that the level and the extent of compliance by the states to the international norms relating to disability would play a significant role in determining how effective an international instrument can be for promoting the rights of persons with disability. While binding legal instruments have clear normative force, non-binding instruments such as declarations, resolutions, codes of conduct, guidelines, and decisions of international bodies are gaining recognition as important sources of international law. The concept of norms has always been a dynamic one, and the status of a particular instrument may change over time. Non-binding instruments lead to the formation of binding agreements. Norms that are informal or limited when negotiated may over time acquire legitimacy and normative force. A number of experts from the human rights community as well as advocates for disability rights share the view that the issue of a new international instrument should also be examined in the context of the present constraints and potential for adjudication of the human rights of persons with disability faced by the existing United Nations human rights mechanisms, the empowerment of the disability community as well as the community at large, the issue of capacity building in the disability community, as well as non-traditional sectors of society to address issues of concern to them in the existing judicial and administrative fora, and mainstreaming of disability in a broader policy and legal discourse, networking among the disability community and their advocates, the supporting non-governmental community, academic institutions, legal experts and practitioners to forge a sense of integrated community to prioritize the agenda for protecting and promoting the rights of persons with disability. Let me mention about the options for future action to promote the rights of persons with disability. As a result of consultation, interpretation and implementation of the vast existing body of international norms and standards concerning persons with disability, new networks and groups of policymakers, program specialists, academics and advocates have emerged. Together, they are contributing to the universal application of the international norms and standards, which would thereby further the advancement of the rights of all. In considering plans for future action, the following points may be incorporated in recommendations to promote a society for all. 1. Adoption of legislative frameworks by governments that reflects international standards relating to disability that advance rights of persons with disability. 2. Commitment by policymakers, program planners and technical experts to broaden policy dialogues with regard to the incorporation of international norms relating to disability as well as specific legislative mandates that emanate from the disability legislation in the respective countries. 3. Involvement of civil society in a broad discourse on law and disability policies, how to incorporate international norms in domestic legislation and policies. And 4. Organization of innovative fora in which legal and policy professionals, academics and civil society can exchange knowledge and experience as well as obtain technical guidance and advice on development of disability sensitive policies and laws. Human rights for persons with disability encompass human rights in all spheres of life. The future work of the disability community has the potential to integrate the resources of traditional human rights communities, focusing on political and civil rights, and non-traditional human rights communities focusing on economic, social and cultural rights, as well as civil society organizations that have not yet focused on issues concerning persons with disability. Newly emerging disability sensitized communities would work together towards the goal of a society for all in promoting economic, social and cultural rights from a disability perspective, which would play a significant role in the common endeavor of the international community to achieve a society accessible for all. Let me sum up. Any restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity in a manner or within the range considered normal for the human beings that results from impairment is termed as disability. Individuals living with disability are denied the access to human rights, inclusion, communication, basic facilities such as healthcare, education and employment in the general scenario. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability in the year 2007 and International Disability Rights Monitor in the United Nations are some of the international initiatives to consider the rights of persons with disability. The purpose of the Convention was to promote, protect and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedom by all persons with disability, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. The mission of the International Disability Rights Monitor project is to promote the full inclusion and participation of people with disability in society and to advance the use of international humanitarian law in ensuring that the rights of people with disability are respected and ensured. The existing human rights mechanisms at the international level have not yet fully addressed the rights of persons with disability within their respective mandates. The concept of norms has always been a dynamic one, and the status of a particular instrument may change over time. Non-binding instruments lead to the formation of binding agreements. Norms that are informal or limited when negotiated may over time acquire legitimacy and normative force. Let me sign off now and hope to see you in another session. Thank you.